All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Martinez. I'm the program manager with the Patient Navigator Training Collaborative. We're so excited to have you all joining us today for our third Navigator Wellness Hour. Rebecca, do you hear me okay? Okay. Wonderful. So we have, I know some people who have been joining us for our previous two sessions, and we have some brand new people. And I noticed we have someone from Iowa and someone from Michigan, as well as many parts of rural Colorado. So excited to have a diverse group of people in the room. How it's going to work is Rebecca is going to give a brief presentation on our topic today is helping clients with a family in conflict. And then we're going to do a breakout room activity, which we will send you off into virtual breakout rooms where you'll be able to have small group discussions, and we'll have groups of either 3 to 4 people. As we wait for a couple more people to join us, I'll assign rooms and kind of see how that will play out. And if you haven't already, just take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. Just share your name and your agency and where you're from. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Rebecca to get us started for the day.
Great, thanks, Erin. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Rebecca Ritchie. I'm a psychologist, as well as a social worker and a addictions counselor here in Denver. And I'm so happy to be here today. When we decided that this was going to be a topic that we were going to talk about, I got really excited because this is one of my sort of areas of specialty. And working with families is an area where a lot of people feel very uncomfortable, and for good reason. It can be a very uncomfortable situation. And so without further ado, what I'm going to do is just jump into our PowerPoint for today. It looks like we have folks joining us from all sorts of different organizations and all sorts of different roles, which is very exciting. And so first things first here, before we do anything else, I'd like everybody to take a few minutes and just kind of go through this self-assessment. And so if you can, get a pen and paper. If you just want to do it in your mind, that's fine too. But the first thing, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you in working with families who are in conflict? And to use a little bit of good old MI here, why did you rate yourself at this number as opposed to a number that's higher on that scale? Also, why did you rate yourself at this number as opposed to a number that's lower on the scale? What are some of your concerns about working with families who might be in conflict? And also, what are your favorite things about working with families in conflict? And I know traditionally that so far, the last couple of modules, this has been a wonderfully chatty group. And so I want to give folks a few minutes to share answers if you feel that you'd like to do so, but feel free, please, to share with the group.
And Rebecca, you can go ahead and share your slides, or I don't know if you were waiting.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I thought I did. Oh. Sorry, technical difficulties here.
No worries.
There we go. All right.
Perfect. Everyone see? Thumbs up? Yeah.
Okay, so here's the self-assessment. I'm so sorry, guys. So here are the questions I just asked you. Yeah, if you can just take a few minutes and kind of jot down your answers to some of these. And I'd love to hear some participant answers to some of this stuff. Let me see if I can kind of pick on somebody. John, are you available to chat?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I rated myself a 2, and I
Okay.
rated myself at 2 simply because being here at the Denver Housing Authority, there's a lot of conflict, of course, going around families, and the people I work with are physically challenged as well as seniors. And because I see my patient every day, and I rarely see their family, I have no idea who's telling the truth or their version of the truth or who's making things up. And I do know that my people will sometimes be very abusive to family members,
Oh, yeah.
verbally abusive to family members. And I do think sometimes because they're in low income housing, they may consider themselves throwaway people.
Oh, uh-huh. Okay, so kind of low on that scale. And so why did you rate yourself a 2 as opposed to like a 4?
I rated myself a 2 because I'm not quite sure how to deal with the unknowns.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, I had somebody who was getting somebody to help them, and we had worked everything out, and then the patient went and told off the family members, and that ended the relationship. And I was like, how do we recover from this?
Yeah, good question. Okay, and so why did you rate yourself a 2 and not a 1?
I rated myself a 2 because I can be fully present and I can hear all sides of an issue.
Great, that's an awesome skill and so important for families. Perfect. And so what are your general concerns about working with families who have conflict?
My general concern when working with families with conflict is sometimes the resident or the patient will be on your side, and sometimes the family will be on side, and then sometimes they both will be against you.
Right. Okay. Yeah, definitely valid. And so what are your favorite things about working with families who might have conflict?
My favorite things of working with families is sometimes they can come to a peaceful agreement, and we can work things out. And that's a possibility.
Absolutely. And it's such a beautiful thing to help a whole family as a unit decide what the best course of action is and make a plan around it, and then to see them making really positive changes together. Excellent. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share their answer to one or some of these questions? Anybody have different concerns than John had?
I think on our side, like the concerns working with families in conflict is sometimes lack of resources.
Okay.
That can make it really difficult in working with them if, either you're not sure or, there's limited resources available to assist.
Excellent. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And hopefully, the point of these sessions, not only to do a little bit of education, but to create and maintain this wonderful peer community that everybody has. And so hopefully we can, sort of create a system where everyone can share resources they have. And today is a great time to share with each other resources around working with families. So we'll have a little bit of time at the end to hopefully share some resources. Okay, great. Well, thank you for those of you who shared. There's a world of concerns when working with families. It's tricky. It's very tricky. So let's talk about some of the skills that you might need and some skills that we can develop around this. So here are our learning objectives for this session for you to identify families who have some conflict, learn some skills to use when working with families who have conflict, and successfully plan an intervention with a family in conflict. So let's jump in. So the first learning objective for today was to identify families who have conflict. And as I was creating this presentation, I was trying to kind of figure out how to relay this. And I guess really the best way to do is just to say that literally every family has conflict at some point in time. And so, like I said, there's a wide variety of folks on the call today, which is excellent. And so everyone, it seems like, has different backgrounds and different experience in working with folks who folks in a family situation. So some of you might see the individual, like John said, and the individual might be the person that you work with almost all the time, and then they're just relaying to you information about their family, or you just see their family very sporadically. Some of you might only work with families. And if you're a person that only works with families, then you definitely know that all families are going to have conflict at some point in time. Families, like any other group, come with different people in them, and different personalities, people with different viewpoints or ideas. And whenever you have a situation where people are kind of forced to be together, but they have different personalities and ideas, you're going to have a little bit of conflict. Taking from John's example, he works with individuals who are residents of a low income or homeless facility. And so, when he works with families, they're probably not coming to him because they're having a great time. They're probably coming to John because they're not understanding, they're not agreeing with what's happening. They have questions about it, they have concerns about it. Or they just have concerns about their family member who might be a resident there. And so, everybody's going to have different ideas about what that means. And in general, as helpers, again, we never see people who want to come to us, families who want to come to us just to tell us how much they love each other and care for each other, which might be true. They're generally there because they have an issue of some sort. So the specific kind of family conflict can be really, really hard to identify. Every family handles conflict differently. One of the things that's really important to remember about families is that they themselves are what we call a system. And as their own little system, every family works different. Every family has a different culture. Every family has different unspoken rules and agreements that they live by. And so every family is going to handle conflict differently. And if you're a person who's worked with families for a while, then you're going to remember that there are some families who can say, this is a conflict. This is why we're having trouble with it. What can we do about it? But most of the time, families are going to come to you, and the different personalities are going to have display the conflict in their different ways. Somebody might be stewing about the conflict. Another member of the family might be out loud about the conflict. I just had a really great family experience where I work. I work right now in in two different facilities in University Colorado Hospital, in two different primary care clinics. One is the women's clinic and one is the seniors clinic. And so in the seniors clinic, we just had a wonderful sort of family conflict, I guess, that I can kind of share with you a little bit. So the matriarch of this family was just diagnosed with a pretty severe dementia disorder, and her 3 children and their 3 spouses and some grandchildren even came to the table to discuss what that was going to look like for grandma. And so I'll kind of talk about what that looked like throughout this presentation. But I can tell you definitely that one of the 3 kiddos, they're not children, they were full-grown adults, but one of the 3 kids of the mom was stewing on the conflict. One was speaking very much out loud about their thoughts about the conflict. And the other one was trying to play the peacemaker between the other 2 children. So those are just some different personality styles and how you might see families handle conflict. It's important to note that not all families, and in general, most families don't have great communication skills. And even if some individuals do have good communication skills, it's very common that not all of them will have those great communication skills. So sometimes teaching families effective communication skills is an intervention that is priceless. And some cultures, family cultures, just general backgrounds or general cultures, they might inhibit folks from talking about a family conflict outside of the family. And so you might find that one person brings a concern and the rest of the family gives them a really dirty look because that's not something that you're supposed to talk about outside of the family. So these are all ways that you might be identifying conflict within a family. So let's talk about how we work with families who have some conflict. It's important to remember, first and foremost, that working with family is really, really different than working with an individual. Working with the individual, you can be, use different techniques and sometimes be what feels like a little bit more flexible. But with a family, it's important to remember that I guess honestly the most important part of working with a family is setting guidelines out front. And so this is a concrete technique that you can use, and once you start to use it, you'll probably see a little bit more streamlining for your families. And so let's talk about what some of those guidelines might look like. So the first thing, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a group where different people are asked to talk and you have the respect stick or the talking stick where, you hand it to whoever has the floor, whoever is the speaker, and everyone else is asked to quietly respect that person as they're talking. But this is something that's really helpful in families because, again, thinking about the different personalities that come together in a family, there might be someone who isn't going to speak out loud unless they're asked to do so, but that person's point of view is important and their thoughts are important to the family as a whole. And so it's really helpful to have some sort of way to let the family know whose turn it is to talk and what the other folks should be doing when that person is talking. And you might think that this is basic and that families should know it, but absolutely it gets tricky. So, having a way to identify who's talking and a guideline to set out on what the other family members should be doing while that person is talking. Another thing that you might want to go over with families before you start working with families, especially those who have high conflict, is what to do if you get upset. So if you have, in different families, you're going to have potentially lots of intergenerational folks. And I mean, working with lots of different generations, I'm sure that those of you who get the chance to do that very often know that they have different understandings of what's okay to say, how it's okay to say it. And so if somebody gets upset, while you're working through a family conflict, it's important to sort of draw out for them what it might look like for them if they get upset. And in some situations, depending on what kind of helper you are and what the goal is of your session, you might want people to speak out loud and say, I'm upset about that. That doesn't make sense to me, or whatever. Alternatively, it might be more helpful if somebody gets upset if they remove themselves from the situation, if they're very upset, or if they write down their thoughts. Again, just depending on what the goal of your session with this family is. So those are a couple of things to set at the outset. There are a lot more, and we'll talk through those as we go on. But I thought what might be helpful for us to do today is to talk about the differences between individual and family work, especially working with families in conflict, and each of the 4 different stages that we talk about when we talk about motivational interviewing. And so I know a lot of you have experience with motivational interviewing. For those who don't, it's just a style of working with people, individuals, and families that is helpful in sort of drawing out their own motivation for change and using that as a platform for making a plan together. So the 4 stages are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. So let's talk about these one by one. If we can. Okay, there we go. So engaging in families in conflict. The first thing to notice when you're engaging families in conflict is that when they're in conflict, it can be really difficult to engage all of the members. However, it is imperative to do so because, like I just said, if I would have ignored one of those 3 adult children, and it would have been maybe easy to focus on the one that was speaking out loud and had lots of things to say about their ideas. It would have been easy also to look past the peacemaker. It would have been really easy to look past the individual who didn't seem like they had a lot to say about the situation. But when I inquired that person about their thoughts, that person actually had a ton to say about the situation. And all families balance each other. And so if there's someone who is not afraid to say their piece, then there's probably someone who is a little more reluctant to say their piece. And so you can do this in a lot of different ways. You can ask every family member what their thoughts are. You can go just do it very systematically and go sort of in a circle. You could ask, who's the oldest member of the family and identify who that person is and ask them what their thoughts are and then go down the line. Or, the opposite. Again, it depends on what the goal is of your session. So some things you might use to engage the whole family. You can use an icebreaker activity. Now, these can be super duper cheesy. However, sometimes families really appreciate, sort of a cheesy approach. You can ask everyone what their favorite family vacation was, or you can ask them what their favorite family memory was, or, in the situation that I was just describing, I could have asked the family what their favorite memory of grandma was, or mom was. It just depends on how much time you have, and again, what the goal of the session is. If it's more short and to the point, which this was my experience, is that I just didn't have a ton of time to work with the family, but it was really important that we make specific decisions together. And so I asked each member of the family to share their goals with the family. So it was interesting to hear what each adult child and their spouse, all of them had similar and also different ideas about what their goals were. And then the grandkids also had different goals to share. And of course, grandma/mom herself had some information to share also. One thing that's really helpful if there's a lot of conflict is to draw the family in and to give them the sense that they belong to a team, that this is a team approach and that we're all working together on this issue. And so if the family members share a last name, it can be like, we're Team Jones today, and we're working towards a situation where the Team Jones members come up with an idea about what to do with Grandma Jones. Something like that, just so that they feel like they're all on this together, that they're a team, it's them against the world, not them against each other. So that's engaging. Let's talk about how we focus families who have conflict. So this is actually really, really helpful in general. And once you have a focus, then the conflict of the family a lot of times can die down a little bit, because everybody has said their piece. Everybody understands what our common goal is for this session. And, they might have different questions about how to reach that goal. They might have different ideas about how to reach that goal. But in general, once we all agree that we're a team and that we're working towards a specific situation, or we're working towards a specific decision, then it makes it a lot smoother sailing when working with families who have conflict. So also, for folks who don't work with families very often, it is important that you recognize the family itself as a client in the same way that you might recognize your individual client as part of a family, or the different parts of the family as individual clients. But it's important that you sort of give the family as a unit room to discuss as though it is its own client. And I know that's sort of an abstract thought, but it's really helpful to think about taking care of each of the members in general, and then taking care of the family altogether. So focusing really gives the family a frame of reference. It gives everybody an idea about what we're doing here. And it really sort of sets the stage for what's going on. So here are some concrete things you can do to help families focus. So the first thing is you can help the family create what we call a wish list. And so in the situation I was just describing, I asked all 3 adult children and their spouses to speak about, if they had their way, where would mom end up? And so the decision at hand was, where should mom go? Should she be at a assisted living facility? Should she be living with one of the kids? Should she be on her own? Should she live in a nursing facility? There's lots of different options. And so the first thing I asked everyone is, if you had your way, where would mom end up? What would be your favorite idea? And so again, just like asking them what their goals were for the day, everybody had something sort of different to say. And it's really helpful for all the other members of the family to hear what everybody else is thinking in this way, so that that's clear. So that, especially if there's conflict, and really high conflict between a couple of members, it's helpful to know. So say the individual who had a lot of ideas, that person might not understand why his or her sibling would have a different idea. And if you talk about your wish list, you can talk about why that's that person's main wish. And it's a good exercise for them to hear kind of where those thoughts and feelings come from. And so it just shares some understanding. It gives the rest of the family members a chance to sit back and listen to family members who might not have a chance or an opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings more often. A really helpful tool is craft a timeline with the family, and I would really encourage you to do this always when you're working with families. Where are we today? Where do we want to end up? And when is that date? And then what are the steps that happen in between now and then? And so, when I was working with the family that I'm discussing here, we all understood that mom was going to end up in a skilled nursing facility at some point, that she has a sort of dementia that is progressive and at some point will, take away lots of her abilities. And so that was something that we knew was going to happen. Nobody knows, of course, when that's going to happen. And so, the end point on our timeline was whenever mom must go to a nursing facility. And, she's a long way from that today. And so here's where we are today. Here's the end of the timeline, what happens in between, and how do we know when it's time to make new steps in between. And it's important that we talk with the whole family about what that means. Is it that when mom has X number of falls, that she moves up in the continuum? Is it that when she can't remember X, Y, or Z, what are the things that are important to this family about their mother's functioning? And how do we craft a timeline around that? And that works in any situation, really. If say you're meeting with a family around a young adult who has a substance abuse problem, you can do the same thing. It's where are we at now? What is our goal? And then what are the steps in between? And what is the relative timeline about those things? It's also really nice to give every family member a job in this. And so family members, of course, relate to each other differently all the time. And so, you can say, this child of the mother who's struggling with dementia, your job is to keep track of mom's falls, or, your job is to make sure that mom's fall bracelet has batteries in it so that if she falls, she can alert authorities. Or, and then for the other adult child, your job is to assess mom's functioning in adult daily living skills. And here they are, and here's how you do that. It's really, people want to feel like they're doing something helpful, and giving each family member a job lets them know that, again, they're part of this team and that they're an imperative part of this team, that without them, this team isn't going to function the way that it needs to do. And so another skill for you there. Let's talk about evoking families in conflict. And so in general, when you evoke with an individual, your goal is to help that person find their motivation for change. And it is similar when you're working with a family. When you're working with a family, your goal is to help the family kind of discuss pros and cons, use a lot of those advanced MI skills that you have to make decisions about the topic at hand. And so this is really the decision-making part of family work. So you have the family's their goals, you have their wish list, and you have a timeline of how that's going to happen. This is the part where you say, this is when we're going to make this decision. This is when mom's going to go to this facility. This is when mom's going to go to this facility. Now, it's really important that you focus on the task at hand. Family dynamics, what I mean when I say family dynamics is that relationship that different family members have. If family dynamics stand in the way, it is okay to say it and to recognize it out loud. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. So this family that I was working with, the individual who was out loud, a speaker out loud, it would have been very easy to let that person just take right over and to let their goal be the main focus and to let them kind of dictate how things were going to go, because that was that person's job or role in the family. And that person was even talking about their relationship with their mother and how they were a little bit more direct than their siblings because of their difficult relationship with their mother. And it made sense. And that's all really insightful and very wonderful. And so this person was really open to the possibility that their relationship was going to take over. And so they were really sensitive to this fact and it was they're wonderful at seeing it. Most of the time, that's not the case. So it's really common for us to work with families where the person who maybe doesn't speak out loud as often takes a back seat and lets the person who speaks out loud jump in the front seat and just drive the car. And it's our job as helpers to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so it's okay to say, you know what, it seems like you are the mouthpiece of the family in a lot of ways, and that's wonderful. I'm wondering if we can take a break from hearing what your goals are, and let's hear what your siblings' goals are, your child's goals are. In a lot of ways, if you can recognize it and just say it out loud, you don't have to manipulate the situation in any other way. And it's really our job to help them identify these kind of dynamics on their own, so that next time that there's a conflict, they might be able to solve it amongst themselves instead of coming to you as a helper. One really neat trick that you can use, and I guess I shouldn't say trick, one really great technique that you can use if there's a lot of conflict and if they are having a difficulty coming to a decision together, is to ask family members what they think other family members might be thinking. Let me kind of unpack that too. So in this situation, if I had more time, certainly, it would have been nice to ask the family member who doesn't speak a whole lot what he or she thought maybe their sibling who is the peacemaker, what is that person thinking right now? And in a way, it's really neat to explore how much insight that person has into their siblings or their family members' understanding of the situation. And, they might be really eloquent in saying, I think that my sibling is thinking X, Y, and Z about this situation. And that would be great. And you might also find that person saying, I honestly have no clue what they're thinking. It doesn't make any sense to me. And that is a big red flag, because if it doesn't make sense to someone what their family members are thinking, then it's easier for them to react and not be insightful and willing to listen and willing to have a team approach. So that is one thing that's been really successful for me just in my career as a psychologist, asking people, hey, what do you think your dad is thinking right now? Or what do you think your sister's thinking right now? So those are some skills you can use in evoking. Finally, we come to planning, and planning with family should be very, very hands-on. So when you're working with an individual, you can kind of even sometimes be very abstract in terms of thinking about planning. Not so with families. Once we've made a decision, once we've come to a decision together, the more conflict there is, the more imperative it is that our plan is very, very hands-on. And so what I've even done with families in the past is just get a big sheet of paper. We'll write out the timeline, even across the piece of paper. We'll write down everybody's jobs. It's Joe's job to check in with grandma about, this thing or that thing. It's Mary's job to check in with grandma about this or that thing. And as soon as everybody's agreed on a plan, just to write it down and to make copies for every single member. And in writing it down, it does a lot of things. First of all, everybody's interpretation of how this meeting went is going to be different. And when you write down the plan, it takes away everybody's understanding of the interpersonal part of it, and it just focuses on the plan at hand. And so you can say, we walked out of this meeting with this timeline, with everybody, Joe's got this goal, Mary's got this goal, here's what we're going to be doing, and here's our plan. And so they don't, as the family leaves, they don't have to gauge the success of this family meeting based on how they feel about how things went. They can gauge success based on the concrete goals that they have laid out for the family. And that is what makes a lot more sense in most situations. Of course, unless you're a therapist and they're coming to you to work out some sort of conflict and to tend to some of those more emotional stuff. But if they're coming to you because they need you to help them figure something out and they have too much conflict around it, then leading with a goal is the key. And making sure everybody knows what their role is in the success of this plan. So it's really important also that we focus on how to end a family work session. It's easy for people, like I said, to kind of leave feeling uncomfortable about the way that things went, which is okay. It's okay if that has to happen. But, if you can kind of zip everybody up after you've unzipped them and let all their family dynamics out. It's just really, really helpful. So first things first, focus on a sense of belongingness within the family. And, it's likely that you've been sort of throughout referring to the family as a team, like this is Team Jones is doing this, and really hit that hard at the end that, Team Jones really came together today, and there was some conflict, and not everybody agreed about everything, but overall, Team Jones made a great decision, and now we have a goal, and we have it all laid out. And so congratulations, Team Jones. You can also ask every member if their goals were met, and it's okay if some people leave without getting their goals met. Not everybody's going to get all their goals met all the time, but in general, if you can acknowledge that those goals weren't met, then it makes it easier for that person to deal with. And so, especially if their goals were exactly opposite of the rest of the family members, maybe grandma's goal was to not have dementia, which absolutely, that's totally understandable, or to not ever end up in a nursing home. But it's just not a realistic goal, unfortunately. And so asking them if their goals were met, and if they weren't met, just making sure that they feel heard and understood can be really, really helpful. Make sure everybody understands what their role is and that how their role contributes to the overall plan and goal. Make a time to check back in. This is of utmost importance because you don't want to create this plan and, like I said, zip everybody back up and send them on their way and say, all right, bye, see ya, never. Because that family is going to leave your office and immediately go back into their family dynamics, because that's how it works. And so if this family left my office the other day and felt like the sibling who is the out loud speaker just took right back over and, said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to do this and this instead. This is my goal. This is how it's going to happen. It would have been very unsettling. And so instead, what I said is, come back in 2 weeks. We're going to discuss this again. We're going to check in and we're going to see how it's going. Also, it's really nice to identify a member of the family who's going to be the main point of contact. A lot of times it's really helpful if this isn't the family member who isn't afraid to speak out loud. You can pick a different family member. It can be someone who maybe the peacemaker, maybe the quiet person. Really, it's okay to pick whoever, but just making sure that everybody agrees that this person can be the main point of contact. And checking back in with the whole family, not just checking back in with that one person. So everybody's got an opportunity to say their piece. Everybody's got opportunity then to make themselves be heard again in a couple of weeks. So, or whatever the appropriate time frame is for the goals that you have in place. So that is a lot. There's a lot of really great family stuff. And so what I'd like for us to do now, we're going to do some breakout room stuff. We're going to jump into some breakout rooms, but what I'd like for you to do while we're breaking everyone up is engage in this activity, and then you can talk about it with your fellow breakout room members. So let me explain this before we do breakouts. So the first thing is to draw a picture of your family or a family with whom you've recently worked. This picture should name all of the members and show you sitting around a shared workspace. And so what I don't mean like make a Degas or a Van Gogh of a family, just draw like a square table and then circles for everybody and then label them who those people were. And it doesn't have to be actually a real situation. It doesn't have to be your family if that's a touchy subject or something that's uncomfortable to talk about. Think about a family instead who you've worked with recently or in the past. And think briefly about each member of the family and just jot down a couple of personal characteristics that each member might bring to the table. And so if I were going to do this about the family I've been speaking about, I would make a table and then, make 7, 8, 10 maybe little circles, 6 for the siblings and their spouses, 1 for grandma, 1 for each of the grandkids, and 1 for myself. And, then I would just jot down, sibling number 1, that this was the speaker of the family. This person wasn't afraid to share their views. Sibling 1's spouse, what was that person's dynamics and what were their personal characteristics. And then kind of take a bird's eye view and think about the family as a whole and what kind of family dynamics come into play. What are some things that the crosshairs. How does this person play into this person, and how did that all work? How do the differing goals compete? And what strategies would you use based on this information? And so go ahead and take about 5 minutes and just jot down your answers to this. Make your little picture if you can. If you don't have an opportunity to jot it down on pen and paper, then just go ahead and think through what that might look like for you. And then we're going to break you up into breakout rooms and give you some time to discuss your results here. So let me stop sharing and send it back to Erin here.
All right, so I'm going to copy these instructions to the chat. So I just sent that out now. So yeah, we'll give you guys just a couple minutes to start thinking about this, and then we will put you into your breakout rooms. And if you want to reference these instructions, just go back to the chat and pull it up, and you should be able to take a peek. Now, if you get into your breakout room, remember that you are muted, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself. If you are on the phone, that's *6. Otherwise, it's this little toolbar down at the bottom of your screen. And also, if you are having issues participating, you can come back to this main room and I can help troubleshoot. So Rebecca and I will be popping in and out of the rooms just to kind of see how the discussion is going, make sure everyone can participate, and yeah, just to see how it's going. So I'll give you a moment to kind of think through this activity, and then I'll send you into the breakout rooms, and you will have to click a little button that you accept to go in. And then once we come back for a wrap out session, you'll get a little notification that you're being pulled out of the breakout room, and we'll just end as a large group and with a couple of closing thoughts. Great.
We'll just give everybody a minute to pop back into our large meeting here. All right. Well, from the breakout rooms I got to pop into, it sounded like everyone was having a really great discussion. I hope that was helpful for you to kind of think of it that way. I know not everybody works with families, and so you might not have been able to draw from working with families experience, and so hopefully you were able to think about maybe your own family in that kind of situation. And hopefully you were able to think of some skills that you might be able to use as a helper in some of those situations. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for being here today. I know a lot of times folks bring resources to these meetings, and that's excellent. If you want to just put those in the chat, so everybody else can see them and can kind of write them down if they want to. Now is a great time to do so. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Erin, who wants to ask a couple of quick questions before we head out.
Yes, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. This is a new series for us, so this is the third session in a 4-part series, and our next one is April 18th. And if you already registered online, you're all set. You'll get the Zoom link information, which is the same. It's the same Zoom link each time. So just if you want to throw that in your calendar or however you best keep track of it. And the topic for the next session is helping clients who don't want to be helped. So some techniques for helping those who may be difficult to reach. And we look forward to having you for that session. We'd also like to continue this series, and just wanted to plant a seed for thinking about future topics. If you want to take a deeper dive into any of the topics that we've already discussed, or perhaps you have a brand new topic that we haven't addressed, and we'd love to hear your ideas. So you can email them to me. You can just at the email that I sent out the reminder, you can put them in the chat. Any way you'd like to give feedback, we would really appreciate it. So thank you all for your participation. It is right at 12:30, but me and Rebecca can stay around for a couple minutes if people have things like questions or anything else that you'd like to discuss. So thank you all for your attention and participation, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.